Most people think the path to wealth is about working harder, saving more, and hoping things eventually add up. That's the advice most of us grow up hearing, and for many, it feels like the only option. But millionaires don't build their wealth that way. They follow a different set of principles that quietly change how money works for them. These aren't complicated or hidden, but because few people practice them, they seem like secrets. The truth is, wealth isn't about luck. It's about choices that compound over time. Millionaires focus on decisions that look small at first but grow into life-changing results. What sets them apart isn't special access. It's the discipline to follow the basics most people ignore. Once you understand these principles, you'll see that building wealth is possible in a very practical way. Here are the millionaire secrets millionaires are begging you to know. The first secret millionaires want you to understand is that wealth doesn't come from income alone. A high salary might feel like the ticket to freedom, but without discipline, it just becomes fuel for lifestyle inflation. Millionaires don't think in terms of what they earn. They think in terms of what they keep and what that money produces. A person making $60,000 a year who saves and invests consistently will often end up wealthier than someone making $200,000 who spends almost everything. That's why so many wealthy people emphasize savings rate and investment growth over flashy paychecks. Another secret is that compounding takes far longer than most people expect. In the beginning, wealth building feels painfully slow. You save and invest, but the numbers hardly move. This is where most people give up, but millionaires know that the early years are just the setup phase. The real growth comes later, once compounding begins to accelerate. The small snowball you started rolling in your 20s or 30s doesn't look impressive for a while, but by your 40s or 50s, it becomes unstoppable. Millionaires are patient because they've seen what time plus consistency can do. One of the biggest differences between millionaires and everyone else is how they treat debt. They avoid high-interest debt like it's poison. Credit cards, payday loans, and expensive car financing are traps that compound against you. Millionaires flip this equation. Instead of paying interest, they collect it. They leverage debt strategically, like using a low-interest loan to buy real estate. But they never allow debt to become a lifestyle burden. This discipline with borrowing is one of the quietest but strongest wealth-building secrets. Millionaires also play a different game when it comes to assets. Most people think about spending first and saving later. But millionaires flip that around. They make ownership the priority. Stocks, index funds, rental properties, or businesses, they accumulate assets that generate income whether they're working or not. Every dollar they invest is like planting a seed that keeps growing. The average person spends extra cash on temporary upgrades, while millionaires buy income streams. Over time, that difference becomes massive. Another secret they live by is understanding the value of time. Millionaires guard their time carefully because they know it's the only resource they can't buy back. They don't waste years waiting to start investing, and they don't waste days on activities that drain them without producing results. This is why you'll often hear wealthy people talk about leverage, not just financial leverage, but time leverage, hiring help, automating tasks, or creating systems that free them to focus on the things that matter most. For them, every hour spent is measured against long-term outcomes. Millionaires also know that wealth isn't built in isolation. They surround themselves with people who think bigger. Environment is a secret most people overlook. If everyone around you is living paycheck to paycheck, spending everything they earn, and complaining about money, it's hard to break free. But when you're around people who invest, build businesses, and talk about opportunities, your own perspective shifts. Millionaires put themselves in circles where growth is normal, and that makes wealth building feel natural instead of unusual. One of the more surprising secrets is that most millionaires live well below their means. They don't constantly upgrade cars, houses, or gadgets. They understand that money tied up in lifestyle doesn't compound. This is why so many millionaires appear average from the outside. Their neighbors don't realize how wealthy they actually are. Their wealth is invisible because it's stored in assets, not in visible luxury. The flashy image of wealth we see in media, luxury cars, private jets, designer clothes, is the opposite of how most real millionaires live. Here's another principle they rely on. Focus beats complexity. The average person gets distracted by dozens of financial strategies, day trading, speculative investments, and get-rich-quick schemes. Millionaires keep it simple. They stick to proven vehicles like index funds, real estate, or steady businesses, and they repeat the same play for decades. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're trying to stay consistent. That consistency, not chasing the latest trend, is what multiplies over time. Millionaires also understand risk differently. Most people think avoiding risk keeps them safe, but in reality, Avoiding all risk usually guarantees staying average. Millionaires don't take reckless bets, but they accept calculated risks that have long-term upside. Starting a business, investing during downturns, or buying assets when everyone else is panicking. These moves look risky to outsiders, but millionaires see them as opportunities. They don't let fear dictate every decision. Instead, they measure risk, manage it, and step forward anyway. One of the most underrated millionaire secrets is discipline with cash flow. They track where their money goes, they make intentional spending choices, and they treat every dollar like an employee that should be working for them. This doesn't mean they live miserably or never spend on themselves. It just means they never lose sight of the trade-off between today's purchase and tomorrow's growth. To a millionaire, every dollar can either buy a short burst of pleasure or a lifetime of income. They choose the latter more often than not. There's also a mental shift that millionaires embrace. They see money as a tool, not as a goal. Most people chase money for the sake of having more. Millionaires use money to create freedom, security, and options. They don't obsess over numbers for bragging rights. They think about what wealth allows them to do, choosing how to spend their time, reducing stress, and protecting their families. This mindset makes them less likely to waste money trying to impress others because they're more focused on what money can do than what it can show. Another overlooked secret is that millionaires don't rely on a single stream of income. Most of them have multiple. They might have a job or a business, but they also build streams through investments, dividends, or real estate. This diversification protects them when one source slows down. It's also what accelerates their path to financial independence. While most households depend on one paycheck, millionaires build layers of income that compound together. That's how they reach the point where their assets cover their lifestyle. And perhaps the biggest secret of all is that anyone can apply these principles. None of this requires genius or luck. What it requires is awareness and patience. Millionaires simply make choices that compound in their favor over long periods of time. They avoid the traps of debt, lifestyle inflation, and delay. They prioritize ownership, discipline, and consistency. They treat time as their greatest asset. Over decades, those simple rules quietly separate them from everyone else. The reality is that millionaires aren't begging you to know these secrets because they want competition. They're begging you to know because it's frustrating to see people repeat the same mistakes generation after generation. They know most people will ignore the advice and continue living paycheck to paycheck, chasing short-term pleasure over long-term security. But for the few who listen, the path is clear. Wealth isn't about extraordinary luck. It's about ordinary decisions compounded over time that lead to extraordinary results. So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. The millionaire secrets aren't hidden. They're right in front of you. Spend less than you earn. Invest consistently. Avoid bad debt. Value time. Build assets. Stay patient. Put yourself in the right environment. And most importantly, let compounding work for you, not against you. That's how you stop dreaming about wealth and start building it for real. And that's really the difference. Wealth isn't built in a sudden moment. It's built through steady actions that compound over years. If you can master the basics and stay consistent, you'll be much closer to financial independence than most people ever realize.